Laughter filled the cafeteria as a helpless boy was mocked. But then Barron Trump stood up. What he said next changed everything in an instant. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual chaos of lunchtime chatter, trays clattering, and bursts of laughter echoing across the vast hall. Groups of students huddled at tables, swapping jokes, scrolling through their phones, or dissecting the latest gossip. It was just another regular school day, until it wasn't. At the center of the room, Ethan stood frozen, his face burning red. His tray had slipped from his hands, sending food splattering across the floor and onto his own clothes. A moment of stunned silence stretched across the cafeteria, but it didn't last long. Snickers erupted first, then outright laughter. And then Jason struck. Jason, the self-proclaimed king of the cafeteria, the guy who could tear someone down with just a few words and walk away with a smirk. He saw Ethan's misfortune as an opportunity, a fresh target to amuse himself with. "Wow, nice one, Ethan." Jason's voice rang out, dripping with mockery. "Maybe next time, try actually using your hands, instead of whatever pathetic excuse for coordination you've got." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Ethan's hands trembled as he scrambled to pick up his mess. His head lowered, his shoulders hunched. He was used to being invisible, and for the most part, he preferred it. But today he wasn't just noticed, he was the punchline. Jason wasn't done. He took a slow, deliberate step closer, making sure everyone's eyes were on him. "I mean, seriously, it's not rocket science, man, unless you're that stupid." "Oh wait, maybe you are." More laughter. A few students turned their eyes away, shifting uncomfortably in their seats, but no one said anything. Because that was how it always went. Jason picked his target, the room watched, and the victim endured. That was the unspoken rule of survival, but not everyone was willing to follow that rule. At a table near the back, Barron Trump set down his water bottle. He had been watching everything, his expression unreadable. The laughter, the insults, the way Ethan's hand shook as he tried to gather his things. It all played out in front of him like a scene he had seen too many times before. His friend nudged him. "Just let it go, man. It's not worth it." Barron didn't respond. He simply stood up. The movement was subtle, but in a room where no one ever challenged Jason, it was like a shockwave. Heads turned. Conversations stalled. The air shifted. Jason barely glanced at him at first. "Oh, look who it is. Here to give your presidential wisdom, Barron." The joke landed weakly, but Jason still smirked, expecting Barron to either ignore him or throw a remark back. But Barron did neither. Instead, he took a step forward, his posture relaxed, his gaze locked onto Jason's with an unsettling calm. And then, in a voice that cut through the entire cafeteria, he said, "Why do you need to make someone else feel small to feel important?" The room went silent. The kind of silence that made people hold their breath. The kind of silence that Jason wasn't used to. Jason's smirk faltered, just for a fraction of a second. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but everyone saw it. No one had ever questioned him like that, not in front of an audience. He was used to people shrinking, stammering, avoiding his gaze. But Barron wasn't shrinking. He was standing there, looking directly at him, calm and unshaken. Jason scoffed, crossing his arms. "What's your problem, man? Just having a little fun." Barron tilted his head slightly. "That's what you call fun?" His voice wasn't angry, wasn't loud, but it carried through the cafeteria like a challenge. Not aggressive, but undeniable. "You're laughing. Is Ethan?" Jason glanced at Ethan, who was still on the floor, eyes down, trying to make himself disappear. The room was too quiet. Even the people who had laughed earlier weren't sure which side to be on now. Jason let out a forced chuckle. "Oh, come on, he's fine. Don't be so dramatic." Barron didn't blink. "You're fine. That doesn't mean he is." A shift. a flicker of uncertainty in Jason's eyes. He had always controlled the conversation, always dictated the rules. But Barron wasn't playing by his rules. He wasn't shouting, wasn't throwing insults. He was just holding up a mirror, and Jason didn't like what he saw. Barron crouched down and started picking up Ethan's tray, wiping off the spilled food without a word. A simple action, but it said everything. People exchanged glances. It was such a small thing, so basic, helping someone who was struggling. And yet, in a room where no one else had moved, it felt massive. Jason shifted his weight, the confidence in his stance starting to crack. Man, whatever. It's not that deep. Barron stood back up, his expression unreadable but his presence impossible to ignore. To you, maybe. He met Jason's gaze and added, "But that's the difference between us." Jason clenched his jaw. He opened his mouth but no words came out. The cafeteria felt different now. The power had shifted. Jason, who had spent years mastering the art of intimidation, now stood in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. He was the one being watched. And for the first time, he had no script to follow. His smirk was gone, replaced by something else, something uncertain. The confidence in his stance wavered as he tried to reclaim control. "You think you're better than me, huh?" His voice was quieter now, but there was an edge of desperation to it. Barron didn't answer right away. He simply dusted off his hands and looked at him, his expression steady, almost pitying. "No," he said finally. "I think you're better than this." The cafeteria was dead silent. No one expected that. Jason's fingers curled into fists, but not in anger, in frustration. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. He had mocked plenty of people before. They got angry, they got embarrassed, they tried to fight back. But no one had ever responded like this. Barron wasn't trying to humiliate him. He wasn't shouting, wasn't mocking him back. He was holding up a mirror. Jason swallowed hard, looking around. Some students still looked entertained, but most looked different now. They weren't laughing, they weren't waiting for another punchline. They were watching him, waiting to see what he would do next. Barron tilted his head slightly. "You don't have to prove anything, Jason." His voice was calm, level. "Not to them, not to me. You don't have to be this person." Jason's jaw tightened. His mind was racing, trying to find a way to turn this around. But there was no way out that didn't make him look even smaller. For the first time in years, he was the one feeling small. Jason's shoulders tensed. His usual armor, his smirks, his sharp words, the laughter of his audience. None of it was working now. It was as if the cafeteria had frozen in time, waiting to see how he would react. His eyes darted around, searching for an easy way out, but there wasn't one. Barron wasn't backing down, but he also wasn't attacking. That was what made this different. Barron wasn't here to win. He was here to make Jason see what he was doing. Jason let out a hollow laugh, though it lacked the confidence he usually carried. "Man, whatever," he muttered, shaking his head. "You think some speech is going to change anything?" Barron just looked at him, his expression steady. "I don't expect it to. That's up to you." A flicker of something crossed Jason's face. Frustration, maybe, or something deeper. He wasn't used to this. He was the one who set the tone, who dictated how these moments played out. But this time, he wasn't in control. Then Barron did something no one expected. He took a step back. That single movement sent a message louder than any argument could. He wasn't trying to corner Jason. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was giving him a choice. Jason glanced at Ethan, who was still on the floor, watching the exchange with wide, uncertain eyes. Something about that look made Jason's stomach twist. He had been Ethan once. Maybe not in the same way, but he knew what it was like to feel powerless. He had just spent years making sure no one ever made him feel that way again. Barron's voice was quieter now, but it cut through the tension like a blade. "You're not the villain you think you have to be." Jason's throat tightened. His usual response, mocking, laughing, brushing it off, didn't come, because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure it was true. Jason swallowed hard, his fingers clenching at his sides. The usual script wasn't working. This was supposed to be another moment where he walked away, laughing, leaving someone else embarrassed in his wake. But now, he was the one standing in the spotlight, exposed in a way he had never been before. The cafeteria was still watching, but the energy had shifted. It wasn't just entertainment anymore. People weren't looking at Jason as their leader, the one they could cheer for as he took someone else down. They were looking at him, the real him. Barron didn't move, didn't push further. He just let the weight of the moment settle, letting Jason feel it. No one had ever done that before. Usually, people either feared him or fought back with anger. But Barron had done neither. He had given him a way out, a real way out. Jason's jaw tightened, his mind racing for an escape. "Whatever," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head as he took a step back. "I don't have time for this." His voice lacked its usual confidence, though, and everyone heard it. Barron didn't say anything, didn't press the moment. He had already said enough. Instead, he turned back toward Ethan, who was still on the floor, frozen in shock. Without hesitation, Barron reached out a hand. Ethan hesitated, his eyes darting around as if expecting some kind of trick, but all he saw was genuine kindness. Slowly, he took Barron's hand, letting him help him up. Jason stood there, his usual exit strategy failing him. There was nothing left to say. He turned sharply and walked away, his shoulders tense, his face unreadable. But everyone knew. He wasn't walking away the same. Ethan dusted off his clothes, still looking around as if trying to understand what had just happened. Moments ago, he had been the center of humiliation, drowning in laughter and insults. Now he stood next to Barron, and the laughter was gone. The cafeteria wasn't silent anymore, but it wasn't the same as before either. Whispers replaced the laughter. Students exchanged glances, murmuring among themselves. Some looked shocked, others thoughtful, but no one looked at Jason the same way. Ethan swallowed hard. His voice cracked slightly and he cleared his throat. "I don't know what to say." Barron gave a small shrug. "You don't have to say anything." For a moment, Ethan just stared at him, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, he nodded. Not a big, dramatic moment. Just a simple nod that meant everything. Across the room, Jason had reached the exit but hadn't left yet. His hands were stuffed in his pockets, his shoulders tense. He wasn't looking at anyone, but he also wasn't storming out the way he usually would. It wasn't defeat, it was something else. Barron didn't call after him, didn't push the moment further. Jason had already heard what he needed to hear. Whatever happened next, it wasn't Barron's job to force it. Instead, Barron picked up Ethan's tray, handing it back to him. Just like that, the moment passed. The cafeteria slowly started returning to normal, but the energy had changed. No one would forget what happened today. Ethan wasn't invisible anymore, and Jason? For the first time, he wasn't untouchable. Sometimes, true strength isn't about winning a fight. It's about standing up when no one else will. Barron didn't just protect Ethan. He changed the way people saw each other. And maybe, just maybe, even Jason walked away different that day. If this story made you think, leave a like and let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an inspiring story like this one. Now, check out the videos on your screen. You won't want to miss what's next.